Do you ever stop and think, what is our purpose in life? What is life? And does life even matter? Hi, I'm Donna from 12 Social 1 and this is my assignment video for TOEFL. In the past couple of months, probably around 4 months, I've been really put my interest in learning about ancient philosophy belief of life. So in this video, I'm going to share with you guys about what I've written in my little diary book. And we're going to discuss about these beliefs. Philosophy teaches us and unsettles us by confronting us with what we already know. Philosophy estranges us from the familiar, not by supplying new information, but by inviting and provoking a new way of seeing. But once the familiar turns strange, it's never quite the same again. Self-knowledge is like a lost innocence. However unsettling you find it, it can never be untaught or unknown. The risks of philosophy is that philosophy distances us from conventions, established assumptions, and settled beliefs. And in the face of these risks, there is a characteristic evasion, and it is skepticism. Skepticism by David Hume is the idea of critical thinking. All beliefs can be proved false, critical to other philosophies, arguing that they were either false or irrelevant. For skeptics, rather than frustrated of being wrong, it is best to believe nothing. Skeptics' main target of attack was dogmatism, a philosophical doctrine that claims to have arrived at absolute or indisputable truth. On the century, the skeptics believed that the arguments for and against any philosophical doctrine is equally compelling. Skeptics did not affirm or deny any belief, they were just claiming that they were not aware of any reliable criteria in proving various claims of truth. Learning philosophy opens you up to a lot more perspective, well in this case about life. Many of them only provided me with fleeting memories, but some taught me lessons I will carry for life. Here are the most interesting philosophy I've learned. Taoism, or the art of not trying. Lao Tzu once said, "Those who stand on tiptoes do not stand firmly. Those who rush ahead don't get very far. And those who try to outshine others dim their own light." Taoism tells us to not swim against the stream, exhausting and gets us nowhere. Tao in Taoism means the way, path, method of life, or the way of nature. There is always progression and natural flow of life. So instead of using force and exhausting ourselves, we could travel through life much more easily by using intelligence. Problems solve themselves, and often by taking action, we make things worse. When we waste our time trying to improve things, we distance ourselves from the natural course. Cannot comprehend the Tao symbolizes the tragic attempts by humans to conceptualize things that are beyond their understanding, but fail to grasp what the universe is truly like. Try to comprehend by creating a deception, but they lose the Tao. By arranging rules or things, we might enhance our understanding, but we also limit it. There's so much more outside of this fixed concept. They try to make things work while building their own prison. So simply act and try. This idea closely related to the flow state. Once becomes the act, like the dancer who becomes the dance. Or wu wei, a concept of non-doing, doing nothing, or effortless action. Why we try based on the Tao Te Ching and the Chuang-Tzu is 1. Trying to improve the world. Do you want to rule the world and control it? I don't think it can ever be done. The world is a sacred vessel and it cannot be controlled. You will only make it worse if you try. It may slip through your fingers and disappear. 2. Trying to be happy. And 3. Trying to be something else, like envies one another. Just be yourself and the world will be balanced. Lao Tzu once said, "When people see things as beautiful, ugliness is created. When people see things as good, evil is created." The practicum of this Taoism is to take the middle path. Go by what is constant and you can stay in one piece. So instead of limiting ourselves to a belief system, we let go. Keep an open mind and give the universe room to show itself as it is. Because emptiness is content. It's the art of not trying, where nothing can be left undone. All I know is that I know nothing. It's a famous quote from the grandfather of Western philosophy, Socrates. To engage in philosophy is to question pre-existing beliefs. You want to be at a place where you feel like you don't know anything for certain and are open to learning new ideas and beliefs. Ancient academic skeptics insisted that we can't know anything for certain besides what we perceive with our senses. And even then, only the raw sensations are sure, not any judgments we make about them. Accepting that there's so much you don't know opens you up to a new information that could potentially change your life. Because remember, you will die. An ancient philosophy from the Stoics to the Buddhists reminding yourself of death was important. It has numerous benefits. It helps prevent the inevitability of death from causing you great distress when it finally arrives at your door or takes someone you love. If you're aware of death at all times, would you quarrel with your friends, loved ones, or even have time to make enemies? Now we've mentioned Stoics earlier. What is Stoics? The core of Stoicism is the very definition of acceptance and indifference. Stoics believe that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Stoics said that the desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience, and paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. So control how we react. Although the situation is bad, we should learn to expect it, because it's unavoidable. Although it sucks, it'll eventually pass away. So picture the worst outcome, and be content that it could happen. The exercise of the Stoicism is to voluntary discomfort, like taking a cold shower or go to the gym even if you don't want to prepare our mental for misfortune. Judge the success based on the amount of effort, not the outcome of your external hope. There's 3 things you need to master if you want to become Stoics. There's wisdom, courage, and temperance. Wisdom by Stoics is the ability to separate what is internal and external. Courage is to persist and resist, and temperance is to do more with less. Seneca once said, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." According to the Buddha, death softens the heart, reminding us that we'll meet the same fate, or it can even inspire you when you feel lazy. Remember that one day you won't be here anymore. You'll be up seizing the day in no time. There's also this saying, a philosophical belief that life is suffering, and it is the Buddha. The Buddha awoke by recognizing that all creation, from the start ends to dying human beings, is unified by suffering. Recognizing this, the Buddha discovered how to best approach suffering, and it is to take the middle way. This allows for maximal concentration on cultivating compassion for others and seeking enlightenment. The Buddha also described a path to transcending suffering, called the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth in Buddhism is suffering, or dukkha in Sanskrit. The Buddha described 3 forms of dukkha. One is physical and mental suffering, and the second form of suffering comes from wanting, not getting, and losing things we cherish. And the third form is existential pain, a form of angst against human condition, the pain when we realize that our lives are finite. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. As the Buddha said, attachment is the root of all suffering. And the third noble truth is that we can transcend suffering by removing or managing desires. The Buddha claimed that we must change our outlook, not our circumstances. We're unhappy not because we don't have enough money, love, or status, but because we're vain, greedy, and insecure. But by reorienting our mind, we can grow to be content. With the correct behavior and what we now term a mindful attitude, we can also become better people. We can invert negative emotions and states of mind, turning ignorance into wisdom, anger into compassion, and greed into generosity. And the final noble truth, or the fourth noble truth, is that we can learn to move beyond suffering through what he termed the Noble Eightfold Path. It includes a series of aspects of behaving right, such as right view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. But wisdom is a habit, not an intellectual realization. We must exercise one's nobler impulses on a regular basis. The moment of understanding is only one part of becoming a better person. Like the Buddha, we are all born into the world not realizing how much suffering it contains, and unable to fully comprehend how much suffering and griefs will come to us too as we grow older. This reality often feels overwhelming, and we may seek to avoid it altogether. But the Buddha's teaching reminds us the importance of facing suffering directly. We must do our best to liberate ourselves from the grip of our own desires, and recognizing that suffering can be viewed as our way to get to know the path to compassion, gentleness, and happiness. The Buddha says that a wise person is beyond fear, and as a result is truly free. And also by grasping, clinging, and avoiding suffering, or in philosophical belief, it is close to Epicureanism. Epicureanism is a philosophical belief by Epicurus in 307 BC. For Epicurus, happiness is the main goal. Humans seek pleasure, but don't get it wrong, overindulgence pleasure is not Epicureanism and not recommended. The essential part of the system is the hierarchy of desires. 1. Natural and necessary desires, like food and friendship. 2. Natural and non-necessary desires, like luxury. And 3. Vain desires, like power, fame, financial wealth, because it'll never be enough. Epicurus said that we call vain pursuits the types of life that do not tend towards happiness. Seneca says there is also this saying of Epicurus: if you shape your life according to nature, you will never be poor. If you do so according to opinion, you will never be rich. For nature's wants are small. The demands of opinions are boundless. We don't allow ourselves to be happy by chasing societal expectations. Epicurus believed that happy life is an absence of anxiety and suffering. This isn't just the pain that comes with the constant wanting and craving for more, but also the fear of both death and God. Epicurus don't believe in death and God. Death and living isn't bad. Epicurus says that we are born once and there can be no second birth. For all eternity we shall no longer be. But you, although you are not master of tomorrow, are postponing your happiness. We waste our lives in delaying, and each of us dies without having enjoyed leisure. So be happy with little. The more simple we live, the more we enjoy luxury when we encounter it. But remember, don't waste our time on vain pleasures and irrational fear. We reach desperately for temporary forms of happiness, like new smartphones. Our consumer culture is that we encourage constant gratification from consumer goods. More and more companies embrace practices such as planned obsolescence to foster an out with the old, in with the new attitude with products. And in philosophical belief, we call the follower of these practices as close to hedonism. Hedonism by Aristippus in 4th century BC is the idea to enjoy the pleasure of today without worrying about tomorrow. The goal of hedonism is to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. Get pleasure from what is present and available, because tomorrow isn't promised to any of us. There's two definitions of pleasure. There's pleasure by Aristippus and pleasure by Epicurus. Pleasure by Aristippus is a state of ecstasy and excitement. But pleasure by Epicurus is a state of tranquility, kill the fear of both death and God. And there's two types of pleasure. There's moving pleasure and static pleasure. Moving pleasure is a pleasure in the process of satisfying a desire. And static pleasure is the tranquility you feel once you're done satisfying needs. Epicurus believed that there's no in-between. The absence of pain is pleasure and vice versa. And the idea of pleasure is the only source of intrinsic value. If self-pleasure alone is the aim of human existence, then people who benefit from the wrong that happens in our society will never fight against it. If not, it's certainly a worthwhile pursuit. So there's no democracy. Pleasure and pain comes along. If you can't control it, you will become miserable and addicted. So it's the control of pleasure that works. We also encourage attachment to family, friends, and relationship. And this too can be seen as temporary forms of happiness. Because people change, grow further apart, and die. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. It originates from the German existentialist Friedrich Nietzsche. This quote reflects one of his values that pain contributes to growth. Intended we avoid suffering too much by seeking more comfortable ways of existing. He focused his philosophy of existentialism on radical self-growth, which was embodied in this concept of the Übermensch, or called superhuman, or it can be also called as existentialism. Existentialism is the idea that existence precedes essence, and that means our birth happened first, then essence. They refute the notion that God made the universe or our world or us with any particular purpose in mind. We are born to the world lack of any inherent importance. Absurdism to existentialists is the search of answer in an answerless world. We are creatures who need meaning, but we're abandoned in a universe full of meaninglessness. Since there's no theology, the world wasn't created for a reason and it doesn't exist for a reason. If there's no reason for any of this, then there's no absolutes to abide by. And that means there's no cosmic justice, no fairness, no order, or no rules. The aspects of existentialism is not the world's lack of meaning, but its terrifying abundance of freedom. Sartre thought that we are painfully, shockingly free. If there are no guidelines for our actions, then each of us is forced to design our own moral code to invent a morality to live by. You might think that there are some authorities you could look to for answers. But all of the authorities you can think of are fake. Those authorities are just people like you. People who don't have any answers. People who had to figure out for themselves how to live. So live authentically. A refusal to accept the absurds means bad faith. So our choice, no matter what it was the only true choice, provided that he made it authentically because it was determined by the values he chose to accept. If the world is going to have any of the things most of us values, like justice and order, we're going to have to put it there ourselves. Because otherwise, those things wouldn't exist. Even though Sartre said that existentialist is the belief that meaning in life is not given by an external deity such as God, but is ultimately our responsibility. But that doesn't mean you can't believe in God and be an existentialist. The Christian philosopher Søren Kierkegaard was considered an existentialist, despite a belief in God being central to his philosophy. What makes Kierkegaard an existentialist is his belief that no one is born a Christian. Even if they're raised in a Christian family, they have to choose to become one. They have to make a leap of faith that intended to help humanity to avoid the trap of nihilism. Nihilism by Friedrich Nietzsche is the belief in nothing. reject the idea of objective truth. For nihilists, all action, suffering, emotions, both good and bad, are entirely senseless and meaningless. Life sometimes questions you why you believe in something, but for a nihilist, there is no why. The answer is there's just simply nothing. But pessimists and nihilists is different. Pessimists believe in the worst outcome, but nihilists do not believe in anything good nor bad. The world simply exists and humans creating morality, creating good and evil. Nihilism is the idea that there's no good design or purpose, nothing to believe in, and no meaning. There's 3 types of nihilism. There's political nihilism, ethical nihilism, and existential nihilism, and that is, life is no value. But nihilism would be a disaster, even though it's a belief to make the best out of the bad situation, but for a nihilist, life alone is a reason enough for living. Suffering is a self-actualization. It's how you become more familiar with what you're capable of. But the quotes, "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," is not relevant, because some people become stronger after experiencing significant trauma while others have become tormented. It's important not to hold all individuals into one precedent. For atheists and agnostics, human life can seem absurd. You're trying to find meaning in life without inherent meaning. In Albert Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus, described about absurdism, a sense of anxiety, alienation, hopeless, nothing matter, and meaningless. Absurdism believed that we yearn for meaning in a meaningless universe. We can push the boulder to the top of the hill, but it will roll back down. We as free and rational beings must fight to create our own purpose. Sartre said that the only problem of meaning of existence was not its lack of meaning, but rather its absolutely terrifying level of freedom. Without an objective meaning or morality, every one of us is responsible for designing our own purpose according to our own ethical code, or abandoned to freedom. Most people tend to suicide or have faith. Absurdism believes that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's not the meaningless that hurt, it's the desire for meaning being consciously rejected. Camus described these pursuits of purpose as like Sisyphus rolling a boulder up a hill for eternity. Just like Sisyphus will never reach the top of a mountain with a boulder, we will never find meaning amidst the chaotic nature of the universe. He described this contradiction as absurd, but rather than despair, Camus thought we should embrace this absurd. Now you guys might be thinking, what are the ethical implications if there's no inherent meaning in life? How do we treat others when there's no essential meaning? French existentialist Simone de Beauvoir insisted that we treat others as ambiguous. We habitually objectify the people in our lives as a set of limited possibilities. We objectify rather than treating them as ambiguous free beings. What do? We open ourselves up to more fulfilling experiences. We embrace this absurd. But don't put up with bullshit. This may seem odd, but it is as philosophically relevant. In a short text by philosopher Harry Frankfurt, he defines bullshit as speech intended to persuade without regard for truth. We may have the instincts to recognize common bullshit, but philosophy can give you important tools to navigate it. What I told you earlier is only a few of philosophy beliefs. There's so much more interesting thing about philosophy, such as minimalism, utilitarianism, empiricism, and a ton more. Because remember, all I know is that I know nothing. So what do you guys think about these beliefs? Do any of these beliefs make sense to you, or everything are just senseless? But don't take it too seriously, because at the end of the day, who needs a philosophy? Reality is objective. Universe is it is what it is, not we want it to be, and wishing otherwise won't make it so. You need reason to understand the world, and reason is absolute. Thank you.